So the UFC is back in the soulless Apex arena. All right, we were all anticipating for this UFC Apex card, and we all love the UFC Apex like Joe Rogan, as he says.
Every fight card that they have from the Apex, which are my favorite.
Yeah.
Now, jokes aside, I'm pretty sure that everybody watching this video hates the Apex cards, but we will all be watching it regardless because we do not have anything better to do with our Saturday nights. So I'm going to be predicting every single fight on this card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. Now we're going to start off with this generational banger between Klaudia Sygula and Priscila Cachoeira. I'm going to go with Priscila Cachoeira by KO because I don't think Klaudia Sygula should belong in the UFC. Alright, so far in her UFC career, she has had nothing but losses, and I don't rate any of the women that Klaudia Sygula has lost to. So, Priscila Cachoeira, on the other hand, you could say, oh, she's coming off a knockout loss to Jocelyn Edwards. Jocelyn Edwards is not bad. Alright, I know she doesn't have the best finishing potential, so getting finished by Jocelyn Edwards is kind of concerning, but Edwards, in terms of skill, she's not bad at all. So I do think that Priscila Cachoeira will be able to have a more approachable matchup in this fight. I think Cachoeira also, she has a couple of knockouts in her UFC career. She's fighting someone who's like bottom of the barrel level, and I think this is one of the matchups where we could see Priscila Cachoeira get a KO. I would not be shocked if Sygula wins this though, just because it's unranked women's MMA at the end of the day, but I'm gonna go with Priscila Cachoeira to get the job done by round 1 or 2 TKO. Moving on though, we got Muin Gafurov versus Jakub Wiklacz. I'm gonna go with Jakub Wiklacz. Like, I understand Muin Gafurov. He had a pretty impressive performance against Rinya Nakamura, but I think that just had to do with more about Rinya Nakamura being a complete dumbass. Alright, because there's such a grappling disadvantage Muin Gafurov has in almost every single one of his fights. And even on the feet, he looked like a world beater against Rinya Nakamura, but that's Rinya Nakamura before he actually developed any sort of striking techniques. Alright, where's Jakub Wiklacz? Did he look all that good against Patchy Mix? No. Is Patchy Mix considered a complete bum by UFC fan standards? Yes. But I do think that Jakub Wiklacz, his grappling's alright. And I think that's where Jakub Wiklacz can secure the victory because Muin Gafurov has not really been able to show any sort of advancement in his grappling over the last couple of years. I mean, getting submitted by Nurmagomedov in the first round hasn't aged the best. Also, just getting held down later on by Rinya Nakamura, I do think that Jakub Wiklacz can do something similar in that position. Maybe Jakub Wiklacz gets a submission win, but at the same time, though, I don't think Jakub Wiklacz is all that. I'm going to go with Jakub Wiklacz to win this fight. 29-28, 30-27 decision. If Muin Gafurov wins this fight, I would not be shocked. But I think Jakub Wiklacz can do enough to secure the rounds by taking down Muin Gafurov and just keeping top control against Gafurov because, again, he has not really improved his grappling game over the last few years. Moving on to Wang Cong versus Eduarda Moura. I'm going to go with Wang Cong on this one because Wang Cong, although she lost to Gabriel Fernandez, yeah, I think that's the big Brazilian woman that just choked her out in the second round. Other than that, though, Wang Cong's alright. Alright, she beat Bruna, who's later up on this card. She TKO'd this random European girl that I feel kind of bad for. Whereas Eduarda Moura, I don't know what she does exceptionally well. Alright, she's on a 2-fight win streak, but that's against Veronica Hardy, who realistically should be a 115-pounder, as well as Lauren Murphy, who was 41 years old at the time, and that was a very close fight against Lauren Murphy. And I think Wang Cong could possibly TKO Lauren Murphy at that point. So I do think that Wang Cong should beat Eduarda Moura. Maybe Eduarda Moura is pretty tough and she survives to a decision. And it's not like Wang Cong's like game is foolproof. If she can get caught in the grappling, I do think Moura does have a distinct advantage there, but I don't think she's going to be able to consistently be just ragdoll Wang Cong at will, and I think Wang Cong has the clear advantages on the feet in terms of speed, technique, and maybe even power. I'm going to go with Wang Cong to win this fight. Do I pick her to win by knockout? So I'm not too sure. No one's really finished Eduarda Moura. Yeah, I'm going to go with Wang Cong by decision. Maybe Wang Cong gets a knockout, but either way, I do think that Wang Cong is just going to prove that she's the much cleaner and faster and more technical striker on the feet. Whereas Eduarda Moura, I do think that she has a grappling advantage. I just don't see her being able to implement it consistently enough to get a decision win over Wang Cong. Moving on to Nurmagomedov versus Javid Basharat. I'm going with Nurmagomedov on this one, and the reason being, I think Nurmagomedov, although he's not looked the greatest in his last two fights, this is a much lower step in competition compared to Bryce Mitchell and Vinicius Oliveira, right? Javid Basharat, right? I will never understand why some fans decide to hype up Javid Basharat, as well as his brother, who I'll get to later on this card. But Javid Basharat is not all that, right? He can fight a technical fight for 15 minutes, where he can pick his shots on the outside and occasionally get a takedown. But that works only against the bottom of the barrel bantamweights on the UFC roster. And anytime Javid Basharat fights someone who's half decent, he's going to either get bullied or, in the case of Ricky Simón, flatlined out cold in the first round. And I think Nurmagomedov is at a similar level to Ricky Simón. Now, granted, maybe he doesn't have the power on the hands like Ricky Simón, but I do think that Nurmagomedov, he has a nasty guillotine. Javid Basharat might be in trouble with that. The kicks will also present an advantage, and I understand that Nurmagomedov, he has his cardio issues, but when has Javid Basharat really been able to push a pace on people, right? Javid Basharat is so low output, and he doesn't have any sort of finishing potential that you're sometimes in there wondering, how the hell is Javid Basharat hyped up as a prospect sometimes? All right, to me, I just feel like Javid Basharat is overrated as heck, and I think Ricky Simón proved that in his last fight, and I think Nurmagomedov, it's one of those fights where he can do whatever he wants, especially early on in the fight. So I wouldn't be surprised if Nurmagomedov can get a TKO or a submission win against Javid Basharat after forcing Javid Basharat to shoot for the legs. But I'm still going to go with Nurmagomedov to win this fight regardless. Bare minimum, I'm going to say 29-28 where he wins the first two rounds. But I would not be shocked if Nurmagomedov gets a finish, especially after what happened to Javid Basharat in his last fight against Ricky Simón. Alright, now up next we got Bruna, Brazil versus Ketlen Souza. Alright, you guys know I love to do this whenever there's a fight that, let's be honest, nobody really cares about. Alright, here's what we're going to do here. If it lands on heads, I'm going to go with Bruna, Brazil. And if it lands on tails, I'm going to go with Ketlen Souza. It landed on tails. I'm going with Ketlen Souza. Alright, now up next, we got Nikolay Veretennikov versus Niko Price. Now, I want to make a disclaimer. I do not want to pick Nikolay Veretennikov. Alright, in fact, I don't think Nikolay Veretennikov belongs in the UFC. However, I just cannot bring myself to pick Niko Price in the year of 2026. Alright, I'm actually genuinely surprised that Niko Price is still even on the roster. I mean, if you really think about it, the only win Niko Price has had over the last couple of years is Alex Morono, who I'll talk about later on this card. But let's just say this. A win over Alex Morono means absolutely nothing. Even back when he won it, which was 2 years ago. Alright, and sure, you can say, oh, Nikolay Veretennikov, other than Francisco Prado, he has looked incredibly mid in almost every single one of his fights. But the difference being, I don't think Niko Price has the ability to take Nikolay Veretennikov down to the ground consistently. And even on the feet, alright, it's only a matter of time before Niko Price gets chinned. I mean, if 42-year-old Robbie Lawler can do it, like, maybe Nikolay Veretennikov can as well. Alright, so I'm going to go with Nikolay Veretennikov to just piece up Niko Price. Maybe go to a decision. I'm going to say decision. It's not like Veretennikov's really been able to KO anybody on the UFC roster. But regardless, though, I do think that Veretennikov, he's not that good. It's just that he's better than current day Niko Price at this day and age. So I'm going to go with Nikolay Veretennikov to get the job done. Moving on, we got Alex Morono versus Danill Donchenko. I mean, this is an obvious fight. I mean, we got to go with Danill Donchenko on this one because Alex Morono at this point is a professional victim. The guy has not won a single fight in the UFC over the last couple of years. And in his last fight with Carlos Leal, bro got brutally slimed out cold. I actually felt really bad for Alex Morono considering the way that they were hyping him up on UFC 313. Danill Donchenko, has he been proven in the UFC? No, he's making his debut. And his last fight was on The Ultimate Fighter. However, Danill Donchenko, he is dangerous. And I think any sort of danger presented to Alex Morono will result in Alex Morono getting flatlined out cold, just like in every single one of his last previous fights. So I think Danill Donchenko should TKO Alex Morono. I'll genuinely be surprised if this fight goes past the second round, but either way, Danill Donchenko should TKO Alex Morono by the first round. I'm going to say maybe like the 4th minute of the first round, maybe the 3rd minute. But either way, I don't see this fight going past the 3rd round because at this point, Alex Morono, he just doesn't have a chin. He's looking very saggy at the moment as well. And quite frankly, I just don't know what he does exceptionally well to warrant him a UFC roster spot in the year of 2026. Moving on to the main card, though, we got Dustin Jacoby versus Julius Walker. I'm going to go with Dustin Jacoby on this one, and there's a very simple reason as to why. Like, if I want to believe in you as a prospect in the light heavyweight division, you have to finish Rafael Sygula in the first round. Alright, the fact that Julius Walker took Rafael Sygula to a decision, that in itself is disgraceful. So Dustin Jacoby, I think, first off, is much better than Rafael Sygula. I think he's even much better than Alonzo Menifield. I understand Alonzo Menifield technically beat Dustin Jacoby, but overall, I would say that Dustin Jacoby, he's the more technical fighter. He can keep the fight wherever he wants. Julius Walker's path to victory is the grappling, but if you're not finishing Rafael Sygula on the ground in the first round, are you that good of a grappler? Probably not. So I'm going to go with Dustin Jacoby to TKO Julius Walker. Maybe it goes to a decision, but either way, I'm pretty convinced that Dustin Jacoby should beat Julius Walker because I'm convinced that Dustin Jacoby would finish Rafael Sygula in the first round, and Julius Walker is the only guy on the UFC roster who could not finish Rafael Sygula in the first round. Moving on, we got Jean Matsumoto versus Farid Basharat. This is a very interesting fight. I'm feeling Jean Matsumoto because Farid Basharat has not really impressed me all that much. But when I really look into Jean Matsumoto's record, I'm thinking to myself, maybe he is a little bit overrated too. Because outside of his close fight with Rob Font, I've not been too impressed with Jean Matsumoto. I mean, he arguably could have lost to Brad Katona, and Brad Katona's been cut from the UFC since. And his last fight against Miles Johns, it was a very competitive fight, and I don't think Miles Johns is all that. Whereas Farid Basharat, yeah, you could say the same thing, taking 29-28 to Chris Gutierrez is not a great look. But the difference being, Farid Basharat, I've just always known that he's kind of like a decision merchant, right? He has no finishing potential, but I don't see Jean Matsumoto being able to finish him, considering he couldn't finish Miles Johns or Brad Katona. So I think Farid Basharat, I don't know, maybe he gasses out as the fight progresses, similar to his last fight against Gutierrez. But in the first 2 rounds, I do believe that Farid Basharat has more pace control, and he could be the one to dictate where the fight goes. I've just not been impressed by Jean Matsumoto, especially his striking. And it's not like his grappling is all that exceptional. So I'm going to go with Basharat to fight an MMA fight and just kind of pick apart Gene Matsumoto with the slightly better shots. I would not be shocked if Gene Matsumoto wins this fight, but either way, I'm not too convinced about either guy. If Gene Matsumoto wins this fight, I'm not going to be all that salty because at the end of the day, I still think Basharat's a complete fraud, but I don't think that Basharat's going to get fraud checked here against Gene Matsumoto this Saturday. Moving on to Mikhail Oleksiejczuk versus Marc-Andre Barriault. I'm going to go with Mikhail Oleksiejczuk on this one because Marc-Andre Barriault, his chin is completely cooked. All right. He only beat Bruno Silva because Bruno Silva is arguably more cooked than him. But outside of that, Marc-Andre Barriault, he has not had the best results in the UFC. He got slimed out by Joe Pyfer. He lost a close decision to Chris Curtis. He got an ass whooping by Nurmagomedov. And sure, you could say that, Marc-Andre Barriault, he's got the cardio, but I don't think that's really going to help him. It's not like Barriault really mixes in takedowns and all that stuff. And I think that's what you kind of need against Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, unless you're an exceptionally skilled striker, right? Because Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, first off, he builds into fights. He's very tough and durable. And unless you have a submission game, I don't see how you're going to beat Mikhail Oleksiejczuk consistently. I think Mikhail Oleksiejczuk brutally flatlines Marc-Andre Barriault. I just don't think Marc-Andre Barriault has the chin for a UFC career at this point. And sure, you could say that, Mikhail's 2-fight win streak right now is kind of fraudulent when you look at Cedric Dumas and GM3. But still, though, I do think that Marc-Andre Barriault is in a similar position to Cedric Dumas and GM3. So I'm going to go with Mikhail Oleksiejczuk to get the job done. I'm going to say by first or second round TKO. If it goes to a decision, I wouldn't be shocked. But either way, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk should win this fight pretty convincingly against Marc-Andre Barriault. Moving on to Jailton Almeida and Rizvan Kuniev. You know, Jailton Almeida is objectively better, so I should go with Jailton Almeida, and I am going with Jailton Almeida, but I would not be shocked if Jailton Almeida gets robbed against Rizvan Kuniev if Almeida fights in a very similar way that he did to Alexander Volkov. Because Jailton Almeida is literally trying to be MLK, Mr. Gandhi out here. Like, he literally refuses to damage his opponents. And although he can get a takedowns at will against a fat blob like Rizvan Kuniev, although he can practically just, control where the fight goes, if he does not cause any sort of damage or a submission, I think the judges are going to give it to Rizvan Kuniev, right? I'll still, though, Jailton Almeida is objectively the better fighter. Rizvan Kuniev couldn't even beat a Curtis Blades with one leg. I think Rizvan Kuniev, he's just a fat blob that was hyped up because he was on steroids during his PFL run. I don't think Rizvan Kuniev's all that. I have to go with Jailton Almeida in this one, but if he comes out similar to what he did in his last performance, I would not be shocked if the judges rob Jailton Almeida and give the fight to Rizvan Kuniev. But either way, I'm going to go with Jailton Almeida to win this fight by round 1 or 2 submission. Up next, though, we got Amir Albazi versus Kyoji Horiguchi. I'm going to go with Kyoji Horiguchi on this one because Amir Albazi is a complete fraud. I mean, the guy, I don't know who he beat to even get into the rankings other than Kai Kara France, which was a complete and utter robbery. But Amir Albazi somehow is still the number 6 ranked flyweight contender in the division. He got absolutely schooled by Brandon Moreno. It's not like Amir Albazi has been fighting all that much even after that loss because he's coming off nonstop injuries. And I think that Kyoji Horiguchi will beat Amir Albazi up pretty convincingly. Kyoji Horiguchi has been looking very good especially in this last fight against Tagir Ulanbekov. And I think this is going to be a very similar performance, considering I don't think that Amir Albazi is that much better than Tagir Ulanbekov. They have a very similar style in my opinion, the only difference being Amir Albazi is more wrestling heavy. And I think Kyoji Horiguchi, even if he gets taken down, there's not a serious submission threat or a ground and pound TKO threat. And over the course of 3 rounds, I can see Kyoji Horiguchi just being the better MMA fighter and putting belt to ass on Amir Albazi. So I'm going to go with Kyoji Horiguchi, round 3 TKO. I'm also not convinced of Amir Albazi, especially due to his health complications. I think he has had, 2 fights over the last 4 years because of health issues. I don't think that's a good sign for Amir Albazi's career. So I'm going to go with Kyoji Horiguchi to put on a similar masterclass that he did against Tagir Ulanbekov and just beat up Amir Albazi so bad that there's going to be a 3rd round TKO. Last but not least, we got Mario Bautista versus Vinicius Oliveira. I see a lot of people picking Vinicius Oliveira, and he could win this fight, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like Mario Bautista is a step above anybody Vinicius Oliveira's really fought and beaten, because Mario Bautista, he's arguably top 5 level in the bantamweight division. I understand that he hasn't had a statement-making win, and he did lose to Umar Nurmagomedov, but he was going tit for tat with Umar Nurmagomedov, and he's clearly beaten almost everybody outside of Jose Aldo. So I feel like Mario Bautista, he's just more experienced, and sure, you can say Vinicius Oliveira can goofball his way into Mario Bautista, but this is a 5-round fight, and while both fighters, they've never really fought a 5-round fight, I can trust Mario Bautista a little bit more, because Mario Bautista is usually the one pushing the pace on nearly every single one of his opponents. And I feel like this is going to be a similar fight to when Oliveira fought Said Nurmagomedov, but the difference is Mario Bautista does not gas out in 2 rounds. I think Mario Bautista, he's well prepared for a war, all right, even though he can get out physicality, which is a big concern because Vinicius Oliveira is a big dude who relies a lot on his physicality. I think the technique difference is just way too drastic. I think Mario Bautista's deep bag of tricks will be the difference maker in this fight, and also the fact that Bautista doesn't have cardio issues. Alright, and even though you could say Oliveira, he's been able to push through the pace of guys like Said Nurmagomedov and Kyler Phillips, those are guys who have historically been known for abysmal cardio, and Oliveira was not able to finish either one of those guys. Alright, if Oliveira were to have finished either Kyler Phillips or Said Nurmagomedov in his last 2 fights, I would be more convinced, but Mario Bautista, I don't think he's going to get finished if Vinicius Oliveira couldn't finish any of his last 2 opponents like Kyler Phillips and Said Nurmagomedov. So I'm going to go with Mario Bautista to crafty vet his way through. I think Mario Bautista's experience, his bag of tricks, and his overall technique and pacing is just too much for Vinicius Oliveira over the course of 5 rounds. I see Mario Bautista as the better MMA fighter overall. I believe that he will dictate where the fight goes, and I just don't think that Vinicius Oliveira will be able to just clip Mario Bautista to win this fight in a 5-rounder, because realistically, that is the only way Vinicius Oliveira beats Mario Bautista, in my opinion. Alright, that's gonna be it for this video. If you guys want to see more videos like this, please make sure to like and subscribe so we can monetize this channel. But otherwise, leave any comments down for video suggestions you have for me. And outside of that, I will see you guys next time. Peace.